All right, so this time you guys have really given us a real head scratcher.
Yeah.
We're going deep on the disappearance of Vivian Cameron and the murder of Beth Barnard.
Right.
All this went down on Phillip Island in Australia back in 1985.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, this case is it's a doozy.
It really is.
More twists and turns than a tangled up garden hose.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting about this case is that on the surface it seems very straightforward, like it seems like an open and shut case.
Right.
But the more you dig into it, the more things just don't add up.
Yeah.
And the source material that we're working with this time is a true crime podcast episode.
Look.
And it really does a good job of picking apart the official narrative and revealing a lot of contradictions.
So set the scene for us. What was Phillip Island like back then?
So picture a small, close-knit community, like the kind of place where everybody knows everybody's business. And in this community, you have Vivian Cameron, a devoted mother, very involved in the community.
Okay.
Her husband, Fergus, is a farmer who also works at the local penguin parade.
Right.
You have Beth Barnard, who's relatively new to the island, and she is Fergus's mistress.
Okay, so classic love triangle situation.
Classic love triangle.
So when Beth is found murdered and Vivian disappears, everyone just assumes, oh, Vivian killed Beth and then killed herself.
Exactly, a crime of passion.
Right.
Seems very straightforward, but then when you look at the timeline, that's where things start to unravel.
Okay, so let's get into that timeline. What are some of the specific things that stand out to you?
So we know that Fergus was with Beth the night before the murder, and he claims that he left her house around 9:05 p.m.
Okay.
He then says that he went home and Vivian attacked him because she was angry about the affair.
Right.
They ended up going to the hospital because Fergus was injured,
Okay.
but his account of the events of that night conflict with other people's accounts.
Okay.
For instance, he claims that he and Vivian arrived at the hospital at 10:15 p.m.,
Mm-hmm.
but hospital staff recall them arriving earlier than that. And then his sister Marn, who was watching their kids while they were at the hospital, she says that they got back to her house from the hospital around 2:00 a.m.
Okay.
But Fergus says they arrived at her place an hour earlier.
So already we have multiple people contradicting his story.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then to make matters even more complicated, while he was at Marn's house, Fergus received a 40-minute phone call.
Okay.
This phone call is never explained and it's never addressed in the investigation.
So who's he talking to for 40 minutes?
Right. It's a huge red flag.
Yeah. It definitely makes you wonder if he's hiding something.
For sure.
And I'm sure the inconsistencies don't end there, right?
You're absolutely right. The morning after the murder is just as strange.
Okay.
Marn claims that Fergus called her from the hospital sometime around 9:30 a.m., worried about Beth.
Mm-hmm.
But other hospital staff remember the call coming in earlier, like around 8:30 a.m.?
Okay.
And they say that it was actually Fergus's brother Donald who made the call, not Fergus.
Seriously, like no one can get their story straight about a simple phone call. It makes you wonder if they're all just messing up or if there's a reason for these differences in their stories.
Yeah, are these genuine memory lapses or are they trying to cover something up?
Yeah.
Like it just muddies the waters of the timeline and really casts doubt on the whole narrative of events.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house of cards on a shaky foundation. It's just
So-
not going to work.
Yeah, and just when you think it can't get any weirder, we have the 10 a.m. phone call, which kind of throws the whole Vivian committed suicide theory right out the window.
Tell me about that phone call.
So this is where things get truly strange. Vivian's friend Glenda, she claims that she spoke to Vivian on the phone at 10 a.m. on the morning of the murder.
So wait, if Vivian was alive and well at 10 a.m., the whole timeline falls apart.
Exactly.
Did anyone else corroborate Glenda's story?
Yeah, so another witness confirms being present during that call.
Wow.
And to top it off, there's a note in a community center diary with details that match Glenda's account of that call.
So why would the investigators just ignore this information?
I don't know, it's baffling.
It's like they were so focused on the suicide theory that they were willing to just overlook anything that contradicted it.
Mm-hmm.
But if she didn't commit suicide, then where did she go?
That is the million-dollar question. And this is where the forensic evidence, which also has its own set of contradictions, comes into play.
Okay, so let's talk about those forensic findings.
Yeah.
What does the evidence tell us, and what does it leave unanswered?
So some of the evidence on the surface does seem to point to Vivian. They found traces of her blood at Beth's house,
Okay.
2 drops on the path outside, and some on a towel in the bathroom.
So her blood at the crime scene, that's pretty damning.
Yeah, you would think so, but there's a catch.
Okay.
No blood was found in the Land Cruiser that Vivian supposedly drove.
Okay.
So if she was injured during a struggle with Beth, you would expect there to be some evidence of that in the vehicle.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole here.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there.
What about the evidence found at Vivian's house?
So this is where things get a little more muddled. They found Beth's blood on some papers at the Cameron house.
Okay, so at first glance, it seems like an open and shut case.
But this is where we have to think about transfer evidence.
Okay.
Beth worked on the Cameron farm, so it's possible that her blood could have gotten on those papers just through everyday contact.
So we can't just assume that her blood being there means that Vivian was involved in the murder.
Right. It could have been transferred innocently.
What other forensic curveballs did this case throw our way?
So the wine glass that Vivian supposedly used to attack Fergus vanished.
What do you mean vanished?
Marn claimed she cleaned it up, but the crime scene examiner says that it was never there to begin with.
So how does a key piece of evidence just disappear like that?
Right. It raises the question of whether someone tampered with the scene, removing or planting evidence.
Okay, hold on. Now we're getting into conspiracy theory territory.
I know, right?
Who would even have the motive and the opportunity to do something like that?
It could be anyone with an interest in influencing how the investigation went.
All right.
But the point is, this missing wine glass just adds another layer of suspicion to an already very suspicious case.
This is getting really complicated.
It is.
And we haven't even touched on the sperm that was found on Beth's body during the autopsy.
Oh, yeah?
What's the deal with that?
So they couldn't definitively rule out Fergus as the source.
Wow.
He claims that they weren't intimate that night,
Okay.
but the presence of sperm contradicts that statement.
So was he lying about what happened with Beth, or is there something else going on here?
We don't know.
This is a tangled web. We've got conflicting timelines, missing evidence, and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
It really is.
Seems like the more we learn, the less we understand.
Yeah, and we'll be back in a flash to dig into some of those unanswered questions and explore some alternative theories about what might have happened to Vivian and Beth. Okay, so let's try to untangle this mess a little bit.
Yeah.
What really happened to Beth and what happened to Vivian. It's like we're trying to solve two jigsaw puzzles at the same time, but we're missing some pieces.
Right.
And some of the pieces might not even belong to the puzzle at all.
Yeah, it really is mind-boggling. And that official story with the whole suicide thing, it just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
The evidence is telling a different story.
Yeah.
So what are some of the big questions that we still need answers to?
Well, first of all, the exact time of Beth's death is still unclear.
Okay.
The prevailing theory is that she was killed sometime around 3-4 a.m. because a neighbor heard a truck around that time.
Okay.
But that's not definitive proof.
Right.
She could have been killed earlier.
Yeah, you're right. We've been so focused on that 3:30 a.m. time frame that we haven't really considered other possibilities.
Exactly.
And then there's that missing wine glass.
Right.
If it was never actually at the house,
Yeah.
that means that someone was there after Fergus left for his sister's house.
It does.
And they could have been messing with the crime scene.
Right. And then you have all of these inconsistencies in people's stories about what happened that night.
Right.
The times that Fergus and Marn got to Marn's house.
Yeah.
That weird phone call that Fergus had.
Yeah.
Marn's story about the phone call from the hospital. It's just all very suspicious.
Yeah. It's like they're playing a game of telephone, and the story changes a little bit every time someone tells it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the biggest question of all, if Vivian didn't commit suicide, then where did she go?
Yeah. If we rule out suicide, then we have a ton of possibilities.
Right.
Was she murdered?
Mm-hmm.
Did she run away?
Did someone help her disappear?
Exactly.
I have no idea.
And the fact that there's no body just makes things that much more complicated.
It's like she just vanished into thin air.
Yeah.
And if she jumped from the bridge, like the original story says,
Mm-hmm.
why didn't they find any trace of her?
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty small area and people swim there all the time. So it's really unlikely that her body would just disappear completely.
You would think so.
Yeah. So not having a body just adds another layer of mystery to this case.
Yeah, it really does. It opens up all sorts of possibilities, and each possibility has its own problems.
Okay, so let's put on our detective hats and think about some of the alternative theories that have been proposed.
Okay.
Could Fergus have been more involved than he's saying?
It's definitely possible.
I mean, he was the last person to see Vivian alive,
Right.
and they couldn't rule out his sperm on Beth's body.
Yeah, you have to look closely at the people who were closest to the victims in a case like this.
Right.
And Fergus's story keeps changing,
Mm-hmm.
and he insists that he and Beth weren't intimate that night.
But the evidence says otherwise.
Yeah, so it makes you wonder if he's telling the truth.
Yeah, it makes you question everything he says.
Definitely.
Plus, his reaction when he found out Vivian was missing is super weird.
Yeah.
His first instinct was to have someone check on Beth.
That is strange.
It's like he was more worried about his mistress than his missing wife.
Right. It's not a normal reaction at all.
So maybe he was feeling guilty or panicking, or maybe it was something more sinister.
Maybe.
But what if Sergis isn't the only one with something to hide? What if there's someone else involved?
It's possible.
Someone we haven't even considered yet.
Right.
Maybe they had a reason to want both Vivian and Beth gone.
You know, small towns have lots of secrets.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very possible that someone on Phillip Island had a grudge that we don't know about.
Right. Or maybe they just saw an opportunity to solve two problems at once.
Yeah, you never know.
It's a scary thought, but it's definitely something we need to consider.
Yeah.
So we've got Fergus acting shady. We've got the possibility of someone else being involved. Are there any other theories that we should be thinking about?
So one theory that people have talked about is that maybe Vivian was having an affair of her own.
Oh, interesting.
Now, there's no evidence to back this up.
Yeah.
But what if she was meeting a secret lover that night and got caught up in something dangerous?
That would definitely add a whole other layer of complexity to this story.
Right.
Who was this other person?
Yeah.
Why would they want to hurt Beth or Vivian?
Right. Were they involved in their disappearances?
Exactly. It just shows you that you have to consider all the angles.
Yeah.
Even the ones that seem a little far-fetched.
Yeah. Because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction.
This whole case is like a hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
Every time you think you have a clear picture, everything gets distorted, and you end up with more questions. We've got conflicting stories, missing evidence, a husband who's acting really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The possibility of another person being involved, and now we're even talking about a possible secret affair.
This is wild.
It is a good example of what happens when you don't have clear answers.
Right.
People start speculating, and you end up with all these different theories that are all very confusing.
And it's pretty clear that the official story with the suicide just doesn't hold up.
No, it's like they're trying to shove a square block into a round hole. It just doesn't fit.
So what about Vivian's family, the Camerons?
Yeah.
Their behavior after she disappeared is pretty strange, too. Let's talk about that next. Okay, so we've got this whole mess of stories that contradict each other and things that just don't make sense.
Right.
But there's one thing that just feels really off, and that's the way Vivian's family reacted when she disappeared.
Yeah.
They had a memorial service for her only a few months after she went missing.
Yeah.
Even though they never found her body.
That is really odd. It's like they already decided that she had committed suicide and they were ready to just move on.
Before they even knew for sure what happened to her.
Right. Like they were trying to close the book on Vivian's story before all the chapters had been written.
And it's not just the memorial service.
Yeah.
It seems like the Cameron family did everything they could to keep people from finding out the truth about what happened.
Yeah, they really seem to want to control the story and make sure that everyone believed their version of events.
A reporter tried to get some old articles about the case from the local newspaper, but they wouldn't give them to her.
And then there was a book about the case that was basically banned from Phillip Island.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Why would they go to such lengths to stop people from investigating what happened to Vivian?
It makes you think that they're trying to hide something.
Yeah, like they're protecting someone or something.
Exactly. Their actions are very suspicious.
It's like they want to maintain a certain image, even if it means burying the truth.
Right.
And to make things even more confusing, there are all these little details that just don't add up.
Like what?
Remember that towel with Vivian's blood on it that they found in Beth's bathroom?
Yeah.
It was the same brand that the Camerons had at their house. But the police never took a towel like that from the Cameron house as evidence.
It was like someone planted that towel there.
Yeah, to make it look like Vivian was involved.
Right, to throw the investigators off.
And then there's the Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
They found it abandoned by a bus stop, which seems to support the idea that maybe Vivian left the island. But no one remembers seeing her on any buses. And if she did leave on her own, why hasn't she contacted anyone after all these years?
It's a good question. The way they found that Land Cruiser is weird.
Yeah.
It's almost like they put it there on purpose.
To mislead the police.
Exactly.
And if Vivian decided to leave, why wouldn't she at least get in touch with someone?
Especially her kids.
Right. Everyone who knew Vivian says she would never abandon her sons.
Yeah, they meant everything to her.
It's one of the reasons why so many people don't believe that she committed suicide.
Everyone says that she was a devoted mother.
So why would she just leave her kids behind?
It doesn't make sense.
This whole thing is just so sad.
Yeah.
Especially for the people who are close to Vivian.
They've never had any closure.
It's been decades, and it seems like the truth is still out there somewhere.
Buried under a mountain of lies and contradictions.
This case really shows you that sometimes the story that everyone believes isn't the whole story. Sometimes you have to dig deeper and ask tough questions.
And you can't just accept the easy answers.
We've really dug deep into the evidence in this case.
Yeah, we have.
And it's pretty clear that the disappearance of Vivian Cameron and the murder of Beth Barnard are not as simple as they seem.
Not at all.
There are too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions.
Too many people trying to hide the truth.
This is a story that really makes you think.
Yeah.
And it reminds you that the truth can be hard to find.
And sometimes, even after years of searching, you still might not find all the answers.
We've put links to some of the sources we use for this deep dive in the show notes.
You should definitely check them out.
But don't stop there. Keep digging. Keep asking questions. See what you can uncover.
Maybe you'll be the one to finally solve this mystery.
Until next time, remember the truth is out there.